The exact moment the metal pin of the Purple Heart pierced my dress uniform, my sister's voice hissed from the row right behind me. Guess they hand those out to anyone lucky enough to survive nowadays. I stood there, shrapnel from Yemen still buried in my shoulder, looking straight at my parents. My father smirked. My mother nodded in agreement. Their contempt was a vicious stab, but it was nothing compared to the truth that broke open 2 hours later. Admiral Harris revealed it to me: 24 dead. One survivor. They did not die in an accident. They died because of your own family. I never expected that for money my family would sell the life of their own daughter. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. But only if this story makes you feel understood. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. The air conditioning inside the Naval Intelligence bunker was always set to freezing. It bit right through the thin fabric of my dress shirt. Admiral Harris did not offer me a chair. He did not ask how my shoulder felt. He just threw the manila folder onto the stainless steel table. The glossy photographs slid out. They fanned across the cold metal with a heavy, wet slap. I looked down. There was no air left in my lungs. Sergeant Davis, face down in the yellow dirt of a Yemen roadside, his body armor shredded. The sand around him was stained a deep, rust-colored black. Next photo, Corporal Evans. Next photo, the charred, smoking remains of our transport vehicle. I gripped the edge of the steel table. The metal bit hard into my palms. My knuckles turned bone white. The jagged piece of shrapnel still lodged deep in my left shoulder throbbed with a sickening heat. But it was a dull ache compared to the numbers printed on the next sheet of paper. Harris tapped a blunt finger against a line of text at the bottom of a financial forensics report. "Look at the source IP address, Captain," he said. His voice was dead flat. I forced my eyes to focus on the black ink. IP origin Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. My zip code, my street, the house I grew up in. For 3 straight years, I lived like a ghost. I ate stale rations and drank powdered coffee that tasted like battery acid. I skipped every holiday leave. I took every high-risk deployment they threw at me just to collect the combat hazard pay. Every single dime of that blood money went straight into a wire transfer back to Mount Pleasant. I bled in the sand to keep my father's dying shipyard from going under. I sacrificed my youth to keep the bank from chaining up those rusting cranes and foreclosing on Richard Powell's failures. He told me it was not enough. Every phone call he complained about taxes, about the unions, about how my Navy paycheck was a drop in the bucket. He always said it was never enough. Now looking at the encrypted routing numbers, the sickening reality hit me. He found a faster way to cash out. He did not just take my hazard pay. He piggybacked off the secure network router I paid to install in that house. He let them plant a digital tracker in my data footprint. He sold the exact GPS coordinates of my convoy to an offshore broker named RG. 24 American soldiers wiped out. For what? My eyes scanned the wire transfer receipt. $7,500. That was it. The price of 24 human lives. The price of his own daughter. $7,500. Not even enough to buy a decent used truck. A cold, heavy block of ice formed in my gut. I did not cry. I did not scream. The military strips the panic out of you and replaces it with protocol. My brain switched into a combat situation report. Assessed the threat. Neutralized the target. Harris gathered the photographs. He shoved them back into the folder. The heavy electronic door to the bunker beeped a sharp mechanical sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "The Federal Bureau of Investigation is already circling," Harris said, not looking up. "They smell blood in the water, but this is Navy business. We lost our people. I am giving you a head start." He finally looked me dead in the eye. "You have 48 hours, Alice. I need hard, direct evidence tying your father to that money trail. Find the proof before the press gets wind of this and the feds lock down your family compound. Do you understand?" I pulled my shoulders back, my spine locked into a perfectly straight line. "Understood, Admiral." I turned on my heel. The hard rubber soles of my boots cracked against the concrete floor like a gunshot. I walked out of the bunker and pushed open the heavy blast doors. The humid night air of the South Carolina coast hit me in the face. The wind coming off the harbor was heavy with the smell of dead marsh grass and diesel fumes. I walked across the empty asphalt lot to my beat-up Ford F-150. I unlocked the heavy door. The hinges whined a rusted, ugly noise in the quiet night. Before I could put the key in the ignition, my phone buzzed inside my pocket. I pulled it out. The bright blue glare of the screen lit up the dark cab of the truck, stinging my tired eyes. A text message from Eleanor. My mother. Come home, honey. I bought a prime ribeye. I am firing up the grill to make your favorite steak. We need to celebrate your hero's medal properly. My stomach violently turned over. The taste of bile and stale coffee rose in the back of my throat. Celebrate? She wanted to cut into a bloody piece of meat bought with the exact same money they got for slaughtering my squad. She wanted to sit across a dining table and look at the medal they pinned on my chest because of a massacre they orchestrated. I stared at the glowing words on the screen until they blurred into white noise. I did not type a reply. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I gripped the worn leather of the steering wheel until my hands went completely numb. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, vibrating through my boots. They thought I was just a survivor. They thought I was coming home to play the broken victim. They had no idea what was driving back to their house. The heavy rubber tires of my Ford truck crunched over the cracked, uneven asphalt of the industrial road. I kept the headlights off. To my left, Powell Shipyard loomed in the dead of the night. The massive steel cranes stood frozen against the black sky, covered in thick, cancerous layers of peeling orange rust. The dry docks were completely empty. The chain-link fences sagged under the weight of overgrown weeds. The smell of stagnant salt water and old diesel fuel hung thick in the air. It was a graveyard of metal and bad debt. My father's empire was rotting from the inside out. 2 miles down the coastal highway, the scenery abruptly shifted. The decay vanished. The Powell family estate sat behind a set of imposing wrought iron gates. Every single exterior light was blazing, illuminating the pristine landscaping. It looked like a luxury resort, a massive glowing monument to keeping up appearances. I parked my beat-up truck at the far edge of the circular driveway. I grabbed my tactical duffel bag from the passenger seat. My left shoulder burned with a sharp, grinding ache, but I kept my back locked in a perfectly straight line. Richard Powell stood on the front porch. He wore a crisply pressed linen shirt. He took a long drag from a thick Cuban cigar. The cherry glowed red in the shadows. He exhaled a thick cloud of gray smoke into the humid South Carolina air. He did not turn his head when my heavy boots hit the wooden steps. He did not look at my face. He did not look at the fresh, blood-spotted bandages visible just under my collar. I pushed past him without a word. I walked through the heavy oak front doors. The air inside the house was suffocating. The smell of aged hardwood and expensive leather was completely choked out by the sharp chemical stench of Chloe's cheap floral perfume. I walked into the dining room. The long table was set with fine porcelain. A thick cut of ribeye steak sat on a plate at the far end. The meat was completely cold. A ring of white congealed fat circled the edges, shining under the crystal chandelier. Evan sat across the table, my older brother. He pushed his half-eaten plate away. His silver fork scraped hard against the expensive china. It was a high, shrill sound that made the muscles in my jaw tighten. "So are you going to spot me the cash, or not?" Evan demanded. He did not say hellos. He did not welcome me back from the sandbox. "The credit card company is threatening to freeze my accounts. I just need a bridge loan until my new crypto startup takes off." Next to him, Chloe sat slumped in a high-backed velvet chair. She stared down at her phone. Her thumbs moved in a rapid, endless blur across the glowing screen. She did not even bother to look up when I walked into the room. No one asked about the ambush. No one asked how 24 of my people ended up in plastic body bags. No one asked if the shrapnel in my shoulder was infected. They looked at a combat veteran who just survived a brutal massacre, and all they saw was an open checkbook. I did not speak. I did not pull out a chair. I looked at the cold slab of meat on the plate. I looked at Evan. I looked at Chloe. The silence stretched until it became heavy, dense, and suffocating. I adjusted the heavy canvas strap of my duffel bag over my good shoulder. I turned my back to the table and walked toward the grand staircase in the foyer. "Hey!" Richard's voice boomed from the front hallway. His heavy leather shoes slammed against the floorboards as he stepped inside. "Do not walk away when your brother is talking to you. We made a celebratory dinner for you, and this is the respect you show." I did not break my stride. I climbed the carpeted stairs. His cursing faded into the background, bouncing uselessly off the high ceilings. I walked down the long hallway on the second floor. I reached the door of my old bedroom, the only space in this house that was ever mine. I pushed the brass handle. The heavy hinges let out a long metallic squeak. I stepped inside. I stopped dead in my tracks. The room was gone. The dividing wall that separated my bedroom from Chloe's had been completely smashed down. The space was transformed into a massive walk-in closet. A custom-built shelving unit stretched across the wall where my bed used to be. It was lined with dozens of pairs of designer stilettos, color-coordinated and perfectly lit by recessed LED strips. The smell of new paint and expensive suede filled the air. I looked down at the hardwood floor. Shoved into the darkest corner of the room was a crushed cardboard box. I walked over and kicked the top flap open with the steel toe of my boot. My Navy achievement medals, my basic training graduation photograph, the framed commendation letter from the Secretary of the Navy. They were all tossed into the box like household garbage. The glass on the commendation frame was spider-webbed with jagged cracks. The thick certificate paper was crumpled and stained. They did not just steal my money. They erased my entire existence. There was no room for a bleeding soldier in a house built on high heels and lies. I did not feel sad. I felt cold. A pure, absolute zero. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor of the hallway. I turned and walked straight into the master bedroom at the end of the hall. Eleanor's room. If anyone asked, I was looking for a spare blanket. But my eyes had already shifted into target acquisition mode. I scanned the flat surfaces, the bedside tables, the heavy oak dresser, the vanity desk sitting in the far corner. I walked quietly across the plush carpet. The vanity was covered in expensive anti-aging creams and a large velvet jewelry tray. I noticed a slight disruption in the arrangement. The heavy wooden tray was sitting unevenly on the flat surface. I slid 2 fingers under the velvet edge. I lifted it up. A stiff corner of brown paper poked out. I grabbed it and pulled. It was a heavy manila envelope. I turned it over in my calloused hands. In the top left corner, stamped in faded black ink, was an eagle gripping an anchor. The official seal of the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI. Why did my mother have classified Navy intelligence documents hiding under her pearl necklaces? I looked at the center of the envelope. There was a printed label written in bold black lettering, IP Surveillance, Mount Pleasant. My blood turned to ice. This was not just a tracking file. This was the digital blueprint of my own execution. I folded the thick paper in half. I shoved it deep into the cargo pocket of my uniform trousers. The hunt was on. 2 in the morning. The massive Powell estate was dead silent. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, breathing in the cold, heavily filtered air. The only sound in the house was the steady hum of the central air conditioning unit. I reached down to the tactical sheath strapped to my right calf. The combat knife slid out with a soft metallic hiss. The grip felt heavy and rough in my palm. I moved down the carpeted hallway, heel to toe, weight balanced. I spent my childhood learning exactly which floorboards in this house creaked mostly to escape Richard's drunken tantrums when the shipyard lost another contract. Now those same survival instincts were helping me hunt him down in his own home. I stopped outside his private office. The heavy mahogany door was cracked open a fraction of an inch. I pushed it with the flat of my palm. It swung open in complete silence. The room smelled exactly like him. Stale Cuban cigar smoke, expensive bourbon, and rotting paper. I stepped inside and shut the door. I did not touch the brass light switch. I reached into my chest rig, unclipped a small tactical flashlight, and clicked it on. A harsh, narrow beam of red light cut through the pitch-black darkness. Red light preserves night vision. More importantly, it does not bleed through the window blinds. I swept the beam across the room. Framed photographs lined the walls. Richard shaking hands with a state senator. Richard standing proudly in front of the shipyard docks before the rust ate through the steel. Fake smiles, fake power. I moved behind the massive oak desk. The surface was a chaotic mess. Overdue property tax notices, union dispute forms, shipyard invoices that I knew were completely cooked. He was drowning in bad debt, desperately bailing out a sinking ship while pretending he owned the ocean. My training took over. I scanned the structural layout of the desk. I locked onto the bottom right drawer. I dropped to one knee on the Persian rug. I shined the red beam directly onto the heavy brass lock. There were fresh, jagged scratch marks circling the keyhole. The brass plating was scraped raw. He was in and out of this drawer constantly. A man hiding a dirty secret always checks on it. He has to make sure it is still there. I tightened my grip on the combat knife. I slid the thick steel tip of the blade into the narrow gap between the oak drawer and the desk frame. The old wood groaned. A low structural protest. I did not twist the handle. Twisting snaps the blade. I braced my left forearm against the thick wood and applied slow crushing leverage to my right wrist. I pressed my entire body weight into the steel. Crack! The internal locking mechanism snapped. The sound was sharp and violent, like a dry bone breaking. The deadbolt slid back. I pulled the drawer open. I spent 3 years disabling reinforced blast doors and cracking insurgent supply crates in the Middle East. I never thought I would use those exact same skills to break into my own father's desk. The drawer looked like a decoy. It was packed tight with shredded bank statements, empty cigar tubes, and old hunting magazines. Camouflage. I ignored the junk. I dug my bare hand deep into the back corner, feeling around the raw wood. My fingers brushed against a thick stack of folded paper wedged under a false bottom. I yanked it out. I laid the documents flat on the desk and shined the red light directly down on them. The first thing I saw was a heavy embossed business card. 3 bold letters printed in the center, MRG. Underneath a generic tagline, Global Maritime Consulting. It was a ghost company, a front designed to wash dirty money. Stapled to the back of the card was a standard international wire transfer receipt. The routing numbers pointed straight to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My eyes darted to the timestamp at the top of the page. The transfer was initiated exactly 48 hours before my convoy rolled into that ambush in Yemen. Then I looked at the amount, $7,500. My chest seized. The air completely froze in my throat. I stared at that number until the red light started to blur. $7,500. 24 United States Marines and Navy personnel, blown to pieces on a dirt road. Their blood baking into the desert sand. My own shoulder ripped open by jagged steel. He sold our grid coordinates. He sold our patrol schedule. He sold my life. He sold 25 American soldiers for less than the price of a cheap used sedan. I looked down at the empty wooden drawer. A sickening wave of nausea hit me. This was the exact same drawer where he used to keep the letters I wrote him from boot camp. The letters where I told him I made squad leader. He took those letters out, threw them in the trash, and replaced them with the receipt for my murder. I traced the red beam down to the bottom right corner of the transfer receipt. There it was. Richard Powell's sprawling, arrogant signature in heavy blue ink. He read the terms. He authorized the transfer. He accepted the blood money. The rage inside me did not boil over. It froze solid. It turned into a heavy, unbreakable block of ice behind my ribs. I did not shake. I did not cry. My hands were perfectly steady. I pulled my encrypted phone from my cargo pocket. I held it over the desk. I framed the receipt, the offshore routing numbers, and that sickening signature in the camera lens. Click. I had the execution warrant. Now I needed to know exactly who pulled the trigger. I zoomed in on the letters MRG, 4 in the morning. The coastal fog rolled off the Atlantic, thick and heavy, swallowing the rusted streetlights of the abandoned strip mall parking lot. I sat in the cab of my beat-up Ford F-150. The engine idled rough, a low, unsteady vibration that rattled my teeth. The air conditioning blasted out of the cracked plastic vents, blowing ice-cold air straight into my face. I needed the freezing temperature. It kept the rage from burning a hole straight through my chest. I reached over to the passenger seat. I unzipped the heavy canvas of my tactical bag and pulled out my Navy-issued Panasonic Toughbook. The hinges clicked into place. It had a thick, ruggedized casing, built to survive a blast wave. I plugged the power inverter into the dirty cigarette lighter. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh, pale blue light across the dark cab. The glare highlighted the grime on the windshield and the dried blood seeping through the white bandage under my collar. My shoulder throbbed, a dull, grinding reminder of the shrapnel still buried in the muscle. I pulled up the encrypted terminal. My fingers flew across the worn plastic keys, setting up a triple-bounced VPN tunnel, routing the signal through Frankfurt, then Tokyo, then a dummy server sitting in a warehouse in Nevada. I was not going to let federal monitors trace this ping. Not yet. I picked up my burner phone. I punched in a number I had memorized during my second tour in Fallujah. It rang twice. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered, sleep-heavy but instantly alert. "Code Red Coal," I said. My voice was completely flat. "Broken Arrow Protocol." Silence on the line. Ethan Cole, former Navy cyber warfare. We served together in a suffocating concrete bunker in Djibouti. He was the best codebreaker I ever saw. Now he was in the civilian sector making six figures doing penetration testing for banks in Chicago. "Alice." Ethan sounded wide awake now. I heard the rustle of bedsheets. "Jesus, I saw the casualty report on the wire. Yemen. They said your convoy got chewed up." "They got slaughtered, Ethan. 24 body bags." "I'm sorry. But what are you doing calling me on a direct line? You sound like you are off the reservation." "I need a trace. Black book. No federal logging." A heavy sigh echoed on the other end. "Alice, do not ask me to do this. I'm a civilian now. If I crack a federal database without clearance, I lose my job. I lose my life. I cannot." I did not beg. I did not plead. I stared through the foggy windshield at a cracked concrete parking barrier. "Sergeant Davis bled out on my boots, Ethan," I said. The words cut through the static like a straight razor. His legs were gone. He looked me right in the eyes and choked on his own blood while I tried to pack his chest with gauze. "You owe Davis. You owe this uniform. Trace a company called MRG, now." The line went dead quiet. I could hear his heavy breathing over the satellite connection. Then the frantic rapid-fire clacking of a mechanical keyboard started. "Give me the target," Ethan grunted. I read the routing numbers from the photo on my phone, the ones I ripped out of Richard's locked desk drawer. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the truck was the rattling of the Ford's engine and the distant rhythmic pinging of Ethan's keystrokes. I watched the blue glow of the tough book. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard the cheap leather groaned. "Got it," Ethan finally said. His voice dropped an octave. It sounded sick. "Alice, what the hell did you stumble into? Give it to me straight." "MRG, Maritime Resource Group. It is a shell. A ghost corporation registered in the Caymans. They do not consult on shipping lanes. They broker military intel to private contractors operating in the Middle East. Black market buyers. Insurgents with deep pockets." My jaw locked tight. "So, the ambush in Yemen, it was bought and paid for," Ethan confirmed. "Someone handed them your exact patrol route, GPS coordinates, timetables, the blind spots in the drone coverage. The insurgents just bought the map and waited." The cold air from the vents hit my face. It felt like freezing water. Richard did not just steal money, he brokered a massacre. "There is one more thing," Ethan said. The typing started again, faster this time. I tracked the origin of the data leak. The initial breach did not come from a Navy server. It came from a low-level email hack. Someone scraped your personal webmail, got access to your unclassified deployment schedules, then used that to backdoor the tactical relay. Where did the hack originate? It was a local IP, Mount Pleasant. Actually, Alice, the ping bounced off the exact same router you are billed for. The Wi-Fi network, the one I paid to install at the Powell estate so my father could run his shipyard's books. "Who ran the scrape?" I asked. My voice was a hollow echo in the cab. "The digital footprint is sloppy. Amateur hour," Ethan said. "A kid playing with dark web toys. Registered device name is Evan_MacBook_Pro. Evan, my older brother. The same brother who sat across from me a few hours ago whining about his credit card debt. The same coward who pushed his cold steak away and demanded a bridge loan for his crypto startup. He did it. Evan sat in his bedroom, piggybacked on my internet connection, and hacked my emails to steal military coordinates. He handed the data to Richard, and Richard used the legitimate front of the Powell shipyard to broker the deal with MRG, a family business. Alice. Are you still there? Ethan asked. Burn the connection, Ethan. Erase the logs. Alice, wait. I reached out and slammed the heavy lid of the tough book shut. The blue light died instantly. The cab of the truck went completely dark. I sat in the pitch black for a full minute. I listened to the engine rumble. I felt the cold air biting into my skin. 24 soldiers dead because my brother wanted to pay off his credit cards, and my father wanted to save his rusting metal cranes. They traded American blood for $7,500. I reached down and grabbed the heavy steel gear shifter. I threw the truck into drive. The tires grabbed the broken asphalt, kicking up loose gravel. Eleanor sent a text saying they were celebrating. They were eating prime ribeye. It was time for dinner. Hall's Chop House was a fortress of expensive noise. Downtown Charleston at 8 on a Friday night. A thick wall of wealthy chatter, clinking crystal, and live jazz bleeding from the mahogany bar. Men in custom-tailored suits, laughing too loud. Women wrapped in heavy jewelry, drinking $18 martinis. The air inside the restaurant was dense with the smell of seared, dry-aged beef, roasted garlic, and melted butter. It smelled like pure gluttony. It smelled like a world completely insulated from the reality of burning diesel and copper blood. I walked past the hostess stand, my heavy boots sinking into the plush carpet. I spotted them at a massive corner booth. My family. The architects of a massacre. Richard was holding court. He had a massive glass of Napa Valley Cabernet in his right hand, swirling the dark red liquid against the glass. A $300 bottle of wine. He sold 24 American soldiers for $7,500, and here he was, casually drinking the profits. And then I told the union rep, you either take the pay cut, or I padlock the gates on Monday. Richard boomed, laughing at his own ruthless joke. I slid into the booth across from him. I did not lean back. I kept my spine rigid, locked in parade rest even while sitting. The shrapnel in my shoulder throbbed. A slow, hot pulse wrapping around my collarbone, grinding against the damaged muscle every time I took a breath. Nobody stopped talking when I sat down. Nobody asked how the military transport flight back was. Nobody asked if the surgeons at the VA hospital managed to pull all the jagged metal out of my flesh. Evan sat to my right, aggressively cutting into a massive slab of bone-in ribeye. His steak knife screeched against the porcelain plate, a high grating sound that made my teeth ache. I am telling you, Dad, Web 3 is the only play. Evan mumbled around a mouthful of half-chewed bloody meat. I just need a 20K seed injection to float the servers. The ROI is totally guaranteed. I stared at Evan's hands, soft hands, perfect cuticles. He never worked a single day on the dry docks. He never lifted anything heavier than a golf club. Those were the exact same hands that typed out my email password. The same hands that hacked my deployment schedule on a MacBook Pro and handed the grid coordinates to a ghost company. I calculated the physical distance across the table. I wondered how fast I could reach over the breadbasket and snap his wrist. 2 seconds, maybe less. To my left, Chloe let out a loud, dramatic sigh. She ignored her untouched grilled salmon. She reached into her designer leather purse and pulled out a plastic ring light. She clipped it onto the top edge of her iPhone. Click. A blinding white LED halo flared to life. It washed out the warm, dim restaurant lighting, casting a harsh surgical glare over our side of the table. She raised the phone, angling the camera so it caught her perfect makeup and the white medical bandage poking out from under my collar. She hit record. Her entire posture changed in a fraction of a second. Her face melted into an expression of deep, manufactured sorrow. "Hey guys," Chloe said. Her voice was suddenly soft, syrupy, thick with fake emotion. "I am just having a quiet dinner with my amazing sister. She just got back from overseas. She got the Purple Heart today. Our family is just..." We are so incredibly blessed she survived. Please pray for her PTSD. She leaned closer, shoving the glowing lens toward my face. Say hi to the stream, Alice. We are so proud of you. A dozen hashtags were already lining up in her empty head. Hashtag hero sister. Hashtag pray for our troops. Hashtag trauma survivor. She was using my dead squad to farm engagement metrics. She was eating off the clout of an ambush her own father brokered. I did not cover my face. I did not swat the phone away. I did not yell. I just looked into the camera lens. Then I shifted my eyes and locked them directly onto Chloe's pupils. I let the noise of the restaurant fade away. I let the smell of the roasted meat disappear. I brought it all back. The deafening roar of the roadside IED lifting the transport truck off the dirt. The blinding heat of the burning armor. The sound of Sergeant Davis gargling his own blood on the sand. I took all that violence, all that death, and I put it right behind my eyes. I gave her the 1,000-yard stare. The dead, hollow look of a soldier who has completely detached from humanity. The flat, unblinking look of a killer assessing a target. Chloe's fake smile faltered. Her breath hitched in her throat. The silence radiating off me was heavy, a physical weight pushing against her chest. I did not blink. I stared right through her skull. Her hands started to tremble. The ring light shook, casting jagged shadows across the leather booth. Chloe stammered. Her voice cracked. The syrupy influencer tone was gone. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from mine. She fumbled with the screen, her thumb desperately jabbing at the end stream button. She yanked the ring light off the phone and threw it onto the table. She shrank back into the corner of the booth, pulling her arms tightly around herself. Good. Richard slammed his heavy wine glass down. The dark red liquid splashed over the rim. What the hell is your problem, Alice? Your sister is trying to do something nice, and you sit there looking like a psychopath. Before he could finish his sentence, a sharp, rapid vibration hit my ribs. My encrypted phone, tucked deep in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out under the table, kept it out of sight. Just a quick glance at the illuminated screen. A priority text message from Admiral Harris. Funds moving. Target spooked. They are scrubbing the Cayman accounts. Move now. They knew the feds were circling. The blood money was running. I stood up. The sudden movement made the heavy wooden table rattle. Water sloshed over the rims of the crystal glasses. Alice, sit back down, Richard ordered. He used his chest voice, the heavy authoritarian tone of a man used to breaking people. I reached into my front pocket. I pulled out a crumpled $100 bill, combat hazard pay. I tossed it onto the white tablecloth. It landed right next to Evan's half-eaten steak. My share, I said. My voice was dead air. I turned my back on them and walked straight toward the exit. Alice, do not walk away from me. Eleanor's shrill voice cut through the jazz music. I did not break my stride. I pushed through the heavy brass doors and stepped out into the humid, unforgiving night. Let them eat. The hunt was moving. The drive back from downtown Charleston took exactly 22 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I listened to the hum of the Ford's engine and the heavy thud of the tires hitting the uneven coastal pavement. The fog was rolling in thick off the harbor, coating the windshield in a greasy film. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel. I kept my breathing slow and measured. 4 seconds in. Hold for 4. 4 seconds out. The tactical breathing exercises they drill into your head at sniper school. You do not let the adrenaline spike until you are looking through the glass. I turned onto the long private driveway of the Powell estate. The massive house was completely dark. Not a single exterior light was left on. They beat me home. They were inside waiting behind the brick walls like rats hiding from a hawk. I parked the truck. I did not slam the heavy door. I pushed it shut until the latch clicked. I walked up the front steps. I slid my key into the brass lock and pushed the heavy oak door open. The air inside the foyer was thick and suffocating. It smelled aggressively of fake lavender. Someone had plugged a cheap wax warmer into the hallway socket, desperately trying to mask the stale smell of Richard's cigar smoke and the underlying rot of this entire family. I stood in the entryway, my eyes adjusted to the dark. Eleanor was standing at the bottom of the grand staircase. My mother. She was wearing a long flowing silk nightgown. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. She looked small in the shadows, fragile. It was a perfectly practiced act, a performance designed to make me lower my guard. She stepped off the bottom stair. Her bare feet made absolutely no sound on the polished hardwood floor. She moved toward me, her eyes wide and glassy in the dim light. "Alice," she whispered. She reached her right hand out. Her perfectly manicured fingers hovered in the air for a second before they landed directly on my left shoulder, right over the thick medical bandage, right over the raw, jagged hole where the insurgent shrapnel had ripped through my muscle. She pressed her palm down, just enough pressure to send a sharp, grinding spike of pain straight into my collarbone. "You are breaking your father's heart," she said. Her voice was soft, coated in sugar, but the venom underneath was unmistakable. Walking out of a public restaurant like that, causing a scene in front of Chloe's followers, it is embarrassing, honey. I did not flinch. I let the pain sit there. Eleanor leaned closer, the smell of her expensive face cream mixed with the cheap lavender air freshener. It made my stomach turn. "We spoke to a doctor, Alice," she whispered, her voice dropping into a tone of fake, tragic sympathy. "He warned us about the PTSD. He said the trauma from the ambush would make you paranoid, that you might start imagining enemies everywhere, even in your own home." She dragged her thumb across the edge of my bandage. "You are sick, honey. You are deeply unwell. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You need to stop this aggressive behavior before you tear this family apart. Because if you keep acting crazy, Richard will have no choice. We will call the authorities. We will tell them you are a danger to yourself. They will lock you in a ward, Alice, for your own good." It was a flawless, airtight trap. Medical gaslighting. She was weaponizing my dead squad. She was using the trauma her husband bought and paid for to label me insane. If I screamed, it proved I was crazy. If I tried to explain the offshore bank accounts and the wire transfers, I was just a paranoid, broken veteran hallucinating a conspiracy. She was stripping away my credibility, turning me into a crazy person so that no one would ever believe a word I said. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. I did not waste a single word arguing with a liar. I looked down at her hand resting on my bleeding shoulder. I reached up. I clamped my calloused fingers around her delicate wrist. I squeezed, hard. I felt the thin bones grind together under her skin. Eleanor gasped. Her eyes widened in shock. I shoved her arm away. I looked straight into her dilated pupils. I gave her absolutely nothing. No anger, no tears. Just the flat, dead stare of a soldier staring at a neutralized threat. "Watch your shadow," I said. My voice was a razor blade sliding across a glass table. I stepped past her. I walked up the heavy wooden stairs, leaving her standing alone in the dark hallway, rubbing her bruised wrist. I know exactly what it feels like to have your own mother look you in the eye and try to convince you that you are losing your mind just to cover up her own guilt. If you have ever been gaslit by someone who was supposed to love you, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel to stand with me. And leave a comment below saying, "I see the truth," because we both know how much it hurts when your own family tries to make you the villain. I walked down the second-floor hallway. I pushed open the door to the guest room, the only space they left for me. I stepped inside and pushed the heavy brass deadbolt closed. Click. I dropped my tactical bag onto the bare mattress. I did not turn on the overhead light. I unzipped the side compartment. My hand wrapped around the textured polymer grip of my Navy-issued Glock 19. I pulled it out. The black steel was freezing cold in my hand. I hit the magazine release with my thumb. The heavy clip slid out and dropped into my left palm. I ran my thumb over the top brass casing. 15 rounds of hollow point ammunition. I slammed the magazine back into the grip. Smack! I grabbed the rear serrations on the slide. I pulled it back hard and let it snap forward. Clack! A round seated perfectly into the chamber. The investigation was over. I was done looking for clues. The hunt was on. Midnight. The coastal air hung thick and wet over the Powell shipyard. I stood in the shadows of the dry dock, staring at the sagging chain link fence. The perimeter security was a joke. A couple of rusted padlocks and a single lazy halogen floodlight that flickered every 10 seconds. Richard stopped paying for overnight guards 3 years ago to save a few bucks. It made my job easy. I slipped through a gap in the rusted wire. My boots hit the cracked concrete without a sound. I moved like a ghost through the graveyard of my father's failures. Massive peeling steel cranes towered over me, bleeding orange rust onto the asphalt. The whole place smelled like dead fish, industrial solvent, and rot. I reached the main office trailer. It sat on cinder blocks looking like a discarded shipping container. The front door had a cheap deadbolt. I pulled my combat knife, wedged the thick steel tip into the door frame, applied upward pressure to the latch. 3 seconds. Pop. I stepped inside. The air was stagnant, completely trapped in the small space. It hit my lungs like a physical weight. The smell of cheap wood paneling, water damage, and Richard's stale Cuban cigars. It was enough to make my stomach turn. I swept my red tactical light over the room. Piles of unpaid invoices, a dusty leather chair, a cheap laminate desk. My eyes dropped to the floor behind the desk. A faded rug kicked slightly out of place. I kicked the rug aside. A digital floor safe sat bolted into the concrete. Old model. Heavy steel. A digital keypad with rubbed-out plastic buttons. I knelt on the cold floor. I needed a 4-digit PIN. Men like Richard Powell did not have the imagination for complex security protocols. They operated on ego and habit. I punched in 4 numbers: 0, 4, 1, 2. April 12th. Eleanor's birthday. The woman he cheated on for 20 years, but the exact date he used to lock up his dirty secrets. The keypad beeped green. The heavy steel bolt slid back with a loud metallic clunk. I pulled the heavy door open. No cash, no gold. Just a single black external hard drive sitting in the center of the empty metal box. I pulled it out. It felt light in my hand, the weight of 24 human lives trapped inside a cheap plastic casing. I set my Navy Tough book on the desk, flipped the screen open. I plugged the drive into the USB port. The screen flashed pale blue, casting a sickly dead light across my face. Folders popped up, hundreds of them, raw data. I bypassed the dummy folders labeled tax returns and union contracts. I dug straight into the encrypted partitions. There it was, a subfolder titled MRG_com. I opened it. A massive thread of emails between Richard and a redacted overseas server. Haggling, negotiating. He was literally bartering with terrorists over the price of a military convoy. They offered $5,000. He pushed for 10. They settled at 7.5. My jaw locked so tight my teeth ground together. I scrolled down to the final attachment. An encrypted PDF. The file name was simple. After _action_report_Yemen_root_B. I ran a brute force decryption script. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10 seconds, 20. Access granted. The document opened. It was a formal contractor report, a kill sheet. My eyes dragged over the black text. Casualties, K. A. 24. Below that, a neatly typed list of names. Davis M. Sergeant Evans T. Corporal Miller S. Specialist. I read every single name. I saw their faces. Davis bleeding out in the dirt, Evans trapped in the burning transport, Miller screaming for a medic. The smell of burning diesel and charred flesh filled my nose, drowning out the stale cigar smoke. I forced my eyes further down the page. Wounded in Action W. I. A1. Powell A. Captain. He knew. Richard knew exactly what happened on that dirt road. He received the itemized receipt of the massacre. He saw his own daughter's name listed under the casualties. He read the report detailing how my squad was blown to pieces. I scrolled to the very bottom of the page. Payment authorization. And there it was, staring back at me in cold digital ink. Richard Powell's electronic signature. Time-stamped 12 hours after the ambush. He read the names of the dead. He saw my name. He saw that I was bleeding in a military hospital. And his only reaction was to click approve so the $7,500 would clear his offshore account. I was not his daughter. I was defective merchandise. A business loss he managed to turn into a quick profit. I did not cry. My tear ducts were completely dry. The rage inside my chest burned out, leaving nothing but absolute freezing zero. Total detachment. The psychological switch from human being to weapon. I hit the shortcut keys. I copied the entire hard drive, every single byte of data, onto a secure partitioned sector of my Toughbook. Transfer complete. I ripped the black hard drive out of the USB port. I tossed it onto the desk. I pulled out my encrypted burner phone. I opened a direct secure line to Admiral Harris. My thumbs hit the glass screen. Short, fast, lethal. Target acquired, evidence secured. My silence killed my people. Initiate the perimeter. I hit send. I closed the Toughbook and shoved it into my tactical bag. I stood up. The shrapnel in my shoulder did not hurt anymore. My body felt numb, weightless. I stepped out of the suffocating office trailer and back into the cold, salty night air. I stood alone in the dark shipyard. I looked toward the highway. Far out in the distance, cutting through the thick coastal fog, a sound began to rise. Faint at first, then louder. A high, piercing wail tearing through the silence of the South Carolina night. Federal sirens. The morning news broke just before 7. I sat on the edge of my cheap apartment sofa, drinking black coffee from a styrofoam cup. The television screen showed a live feed of the Powell estate. Flashing red and blue lights cut through the heavy coastal fog. Men in dark blue windbreakers with FBI printed in bold yellow letters were hauling cardboard boxes out of the front doors. The trap snapped shut. But a rat does not die the second the metal hits its neck. It thrashes. My phone started vibrating on the coffee table. Not a call, a notification, then another. Then a continuous high-pitched mechanical stutter that made the device rattle against the cheap wood. I picked it up. My screen was an endless waterfall of hate. I opened the main feed. Chloe was live. She sat in the front seat of her Range Rover wearing an oversized gray hoodie. The lighting was carefully angled to catch the tears streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks. I never thought I would have to make a video like this, Chloe choked out, staring into the lens with wide, innocent eyes. My family is under attack by my own sister. She paused to wipe a fake tear. Alice came back from overseas, changed. The doctor said it was severe PTSD. We tried to get her help. But she is completely paranoid. She's having a psychotic break, and now she's using her military contacts to frame our father. The screen cut to a video clip. The steakhouse. But it was heavily edited, slowed down. The footage showed me staring into her ring light, but she had looped the exact fraction of a second where I blinked against the harsh LED glare. With the distorted audio and slow motion, I did not look like a soldier assessing a threat. I looked like a twitching, unhinged lunatic. The internet jury swallowed it whole. The comments rolled past in a blur of digital venom. She belongs in a psych ward. Psycho veteran, lock her up, cancel her. They bought the lie. A spoiled influencer cried on camera, and suddenly I was the monster. I tossed the phone back onto the table. I did not care about a bunch of anonymous cowards typing from their basements, but the system cared. 10 minutes later, the encrypted line rang. Admiral Harris. I hit the speaker button. Captain, Harris said. His voice sounded like it was being dragged across gravel. Heavy, exhausted. Admiral, the feds moved on the estate. They did. But your father is not in cuffs yet. He lawyered up, and he made some phone calls. A heavy sigh hissed through the cheap phone speaker. Richard Powell has deep pockets, Alice. He funds 2 state senators and a federal congressman. They are putting the squeeze on the Pentagon, pushing the narrative your sister just launched. A rogue, traumatized veteran conducting a personal vendetta against a local job creator. I stared at the blank wall of my living room. The evidence is bulletproof, sir. You saw the wire transfers, the signatures. I saw it. The FBI is processing it. But the optics are a nightmare. Until the forensics team verifies every single byte of that hard drive, Washington wants this fire put out. He did not have to say the rest. I knew the protocol. I am suspended, I said, flat, no question mark. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Harris confirmed. You are stripped of rank pending a full tribunal. Do not leave your quarters. Do not speak to the press. I am sorry, Alice. My hands are tied. The line clicked dead. I sat in the silence of my apartment. The blinds were drawn tight. The air was stale. I fought overseas for 3 years. I took a piece of jagged steel to the shoulder. I broke into a safe to hand them the man who sold American blood for pennies. And the Navy benched me because a politician complained about bad PR. The afternoon dragged into a suffocating, silent evening. Around 5 o'clock, a faint scraping sound broke the quiet. I moved to the front door, silent on my feet. I looked down. A small white envelope had been shoved underneath the door crack. No stamp. Hand delivered. I checked the hallway through the peephole. Empty. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt cheap and rough. No return address. Just 2 words written in shaky, smeared blue ink. Captain Powell. I tore the flap open. A single sheet of yellow legal paper was folded inside. I unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, the letters pressing hard into the cheap paper. Dear Alice, I saw the news this morning. I saw that video your sister posted. I do not know much about the internet, but I know a liar when I see one. I am Sergeant Davis's mother. The Navy told me how my boy died. They told me you stayed with him. You tried to stop the bleeding. You did not leave him alone in the dirt. I do not care what those people in the suits say. I do not care what they type on their phones. You are not crazy. You fought for my son. You are bleeding for my son right now. They might be your blood, but they are not your family. From today on, you are family to us. Finish the fight, Captain. Sarah Davis. I read the letter 3 times. The freezing block of ice in my chest finally cracked. A single drop of salt water fell from my chin and hit the bottom edge of the yellow paper, smearing the blue ink. I did not cry for my father. I did not cry for the career the Navy just suspended. I cried because a grieving mother sitting in an empty house understood honor better than the people who raised me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The skin was rough and dry. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I stood up. The heavy, suffocating weight of the day evaporated. The chain of command might have benched me, but a Gold Star mother just gave me my orders. I walked into my small bedroom. I opened the narrow closet. Hanging in the dark, wrapped in protective plastic, was my Navy uniform. The dress whites, the highest honor uniform in the fleet. Crisp, sharp, and immaculate. I reached out and ripped the plastic off. I ran my hand over the heavy white fabric, smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle on the collar. My suspension meant nothing. The internet mob meant nothing. Time to take out the trash. The hearing room at the naval base was sterile. Cold. It smelled like industrial floor wax and heavily filtered air. The walls were covered in cheap wood paneling. A massive American flag hung perfectly straight behind the heavy mahogany bench. I sat at the defense table. My dress whites were immaculately pressed. The fabric was stiff. The purple heart pinned to my chest caught the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights overhead. I sat completely motionless. I did not lean against the back of the wooden chair. My boots were planted flat on the linoleum floor. Richard Powell sat on the witness stand. He wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit. His hair was perfectly styled. But under the bright lights of the military tribunal, the cracks in his armor were visible. A thin layer of sweat coated his forehead. His heavy gold watch clanked against the wooden rail of the witness box. He leaned into the microphone. It let out a low, buzzing, static sound. He looked directly at the military judge, a 3-star general with eyes like dull steel. Richard was playing his final card, the grieving, desperate father. Your Honor, you have to understand, Richard said. His voice was thick with fake emotion. He let it crack right at the end of the sentence. My daughter came back from the Middle East completely broken. The doctors warned us about the post-traumatic stress disorder. She is paranoid. She thinks everyone is out to get her. Please forgive her actions. Do not put her in a military prison. Her mind has been ruined by the war. She needs a hospital, not a court-martial. He turned his head. He looked down from the stand and locked eyes with me. It was the look, the heavy, overbearing stare he used for 20 years to force everyone in his house into submission. The look that meant shut your mouth and do what you are told. I looked right back at him. I did not blink. I looked straight through his skull. I looked at him the exact same way I looked at a rusted, discarded piece of scrap metal on the dry docks. He meant absolutely nothing to me. The federal prosecutor adjusted his tie. He opened his mouth to speak. He never got the chance. Admiral Harris stood up from the prosecutor's table. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He buttoned his uniform jacket. He did not look at Richard. He looked at the judge. "With all due respect to the witness," Admiral Harris said. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. Cold. Absolute. "The United States Navy does not need to defend Captain Powell's mental state. We do not need a psychological evaluation. We have the physical evidence." Harris nodded to the tech officer sitting in the corner. The lights in the hearing room dimmed. A massive projector screen hummed as it lowered off the ceiling. A blinding white light hit the screen. The encrypted file from the black hard drive appeared. It was the after-action report, the casualty list. Sergeant Davis, Corporal Evans, 24 dead American soldiers. And right there at the bottom of the page was Richard Powell's digital signature. The tech officer clicked the mouse. The screen switched to a bank ledger. The offshore routing numbers. The money did not stop at the initial deposit. The full scrape of the data revealed the final payout, $57,500, the price for an entire military convoy. The oxygen instantly vanished from the room. I watched Richard. His face turned the color of wet ash. His jaw dropped open. The mask of the concerned father shattered into a million pieces. He grabbed the wooden rail of the witness stand with both hands. His knuckles turned bone white. He was suffocating on his own lies. He looked like a cornered rat staring into the barrel of a shotgun. In the gallery behind him, Eleanor buried her face in her hands. She started sobbing loudly. But it was not guilt. It was the hysterical, ugly crying of a woman who just realized her country club membership, her designer shoes, and her entire fake aristocratic life were gone forever. Sitting next to her, Evan was completely paralyzed. His eyes were wide with terror. His hands were shaking violently against his knees. He knew the federal agents already had his laptop. He knew the digital trail of the hacked emails led straight back to his bedroom. The military judge stared at the projected screen for a long time. The silence in the room was heavier than concrete. Finally, the judge turned his head. He looked down at the defense table. "Captain Powell," the judge said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. "Do you have anything to add to the record?" I pushed my chair back. I stood up. I pulled my shoulders back. My spine locked into a perfectly straight line. I felt the heavy fabric of my uniform. I felt the sharp edges of the Purple Heart resting against my chest. I did not look at the judge. I turned my head and looked directly at Richard Powell. He was slumped in the witness chair, broken, pathetic. My voice rang out sharp and clean as a rifle shot. "I did not survive that ambush because of luck," I said. Every word was a nail driven into his coffin. "I survived in spite of you." The military judge raised his wooden gavel. He brought it down hard against the sounding block. The sharp, violent crack echoed through the room, and then there was nothing but dead silence. The steel handcuffs clicked shut, a harsh, mechanical ratcheting sound that echoed off the cold concrete walls of the federal courthouse. Richard Powell did not look back. Two federal marshals grabbed him by the biceps and dragged him toward the heavy oak side door. His custom-tailored suit looked baggy. His shoulders were slumped. 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. No parole. Evan walked right behind him. He dragged his feet. His head hung low between his shoulders, his hands trembling violently in the iron cuffs. Another 20 years. Chloe got 5 for obstruction of justice and witness tampering. The judge did not care about her follower count. I walked out the front doors of the courthouse. The Charleston heat hit me like a physical blow. News cameras flashed, reporters shouted my name, but I kept my eyes locked straight ahead. My chest felt completely hollow. But it was not a sad emptiness. It was clean. Like a wound forcefully scrubbed out with iodine and coarse gauze. I drove back to my small apartment. I poured a glass of tap water. A sharp knock at the door broke the heavy silence. I unholstered my Glock, kept it behind my leg, and checked the peephole. I opened the door. Hannah stood in the dim hallway. Chloe's 16-year-old daughter. She wore a faded black denim jacket. Her hands were shoved deep into her pockets. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen, but her jaw was set tight. She pulled a small silver USB drive from her pocket. She held it out. "The raw footage," Hannah said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of any emotion. "Before my mother edited the timeline, put it online, show the world you did not blink." I took the drive. The metal was warm from her palm. "I am dropping the last name," Hannah said. She looked past me, staring down the empty hallway at the flickering fluorescent light. "If being a Powell means selling out your own blood for a paycheck, I do not want it." I looked at the kid. She had her grandfather's eyes, but she did not have his rot. "Good choice," I said. 5 years later. I took my honorable discharge from the Navy. I took my accumulated back pay, the federal injury settlement, and a VA commercial loan. I went down to the county courthouse foreclosure auction. I bought the exact dirt Richard Powell used to build his empire of lies. I stood on the cracked, weed-choked asphalt of the Powell shipyard. The morning sun burned off the heavy ocean fog. I drank black coffee from a dented steel thermos. A massive yellow Caterpillar excavator roared to life 30 yards away. Thick black diesel smoke pumped out of the exhaust stack, stinging my nostrils. The operator pulled the heavy levers. The steel bucket swung around and smashed directly into the side of the main office trailer. The rusted corrugated metal ripped apart with a deafening screech. The sound of tearing steel vibrated in my teeth. Glass shattered across the pavement. The rotten wood framing snapped like brittle toothpicks. I watched the machine chew Richard's office into a pile of jagged splinters. The lingering smell of his cheap cigars and stagnant water vanished instantly, blown away by the sharp, salty Atlantic wind. We cleared the rubble. We brought in dump trucks and poured fresh concrete over the poisoned dirt. We built something that actually mattered. The Davis Moral Leadership Academy, a concrete and glass training center for Gold Star families and transitioning veterans. I stood on the second-floor balcony. I rested my forearms against the cold, painted steel railing. The smell of fresh pine lumber and wet ocean salt filled my lungs. The heavy door opened behind me. Black boots hit the composite deck with a measured, disciplined rhythm. Hannah walked up and stood beside me. She was 21 now. She wore a crisp Navy cadet uniform. The white fabric was spotless. Her brass belt buckle caught the morning sunlight. She kept her spine perfectly straight, her shoulders pulled back. She learned that stance from me. We stood in silence. We watched a massive container ship inching across the gray horizon. "Did you ever forgive him?" Hannah asked. She didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed locked on the water. I took a slow breath. I felt the thick, tight scar tissue stretching under my collarbone. "Forgiveness is not forgetting," I said. My voice was calm, flat. "Forgiveness is just stripping away their power to live in your head." I was born into a legacy of betrayal. I was supposed to be a victim of it. But I crushed it. Hannah nodded once, a sharp, precise military motion. "Legacy is not what you inherit from the people who share your blood," I told her. "It is what you build with your own 2 hands." I turned away from the railing and walked back inside my office. I walked over to the heavy oak desk. A small wooden display case sat in the center of the blotting pad. Inside rested the Purple Heart. I looked down at the gold rim and the purple ribbon. It used to feel like a bleeding wound. It used to feel like a heavy, suffocating weight dragging me down into the burning dirt of Yemen. Not anymore. Now it was just a piece of forged metal, a physical receipt for the truth. I reached out and closed the glass lid. The latch clicked shut. The ghosts were dead. I was finally awake. If you stood with me to crush this toxic legacy, hit the like button, leave a comment saying, "I choose my own legacy," subscribe, and thank you. I will see you next time.